Hello everyone, this is Jen Euell with the Women's Foundation of Montana. Thanks so much for joining us today for our Smart Money Financial Management 101 webinar. For those of you who may not have joined us for one of our webinars before, you should know that we are recording it, and that will be available to you afterwards. We can send you a link to it so you can review it or share it with others. In addition, I like to put up this slide because at times the connection through the computer isn't as good as we might like as far as the audio goes, and so sometimes it's better to use our telephone number and call in. You might get better audio connection and be able to hear a little bit better that way. Currently, everybody is muted except for the speakers. At times we do unmute so that people can ask questions. And when we do that, it's very helpful if you can mute your own phone if there is background noise where you are. And you can always use the little Q&A question box that pops up on your screen and type in questions for us. Even if you're muted, you can always get questions to us that way. And then finally, at the very end of the webinar, we will definitely be opening it up for questions, so you can save your questions until that point if that works better for you as well. So I always like to start out by sharing with people a little bit about the Women's Foundation. The Women's Foundation of Montana is a statewide nonprofit organization. We're part of the larger Montana Community Foundation, but we have our own separate mission, which is all about economic advancement for Montana women and a brighter future for girls. People know us best probably because we make grants to nonprofits across the state. But in addition to that, we also do statewide research and reporting. We oftentimes present information to the legislature and influence policy on a statewide basis. And we are also interested in supporting women in other ways. If we can't figure out how to influence the outcome the way that we would like to, either through our grant making or through policy, then sometimes we start our own projects. And one of those is Powerhouse Montana, which many of you are probably familiar with. PowerhouseMT.org is an online platform where women can connect to both resources and mentors. I just want to check and make sure. Kim Shappee, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay, wonderful. So Kim is one of our speakers who's joining us by phone, so I just wanted to make sure she is with us. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and start and introduce our speakers. So today we're going to be talking, of course, a little bit about financial management. We know that although women are working at the same rate as men at this point in history, or almost the same rate, there is still a gap in many ways, and one of those areas is one that has to do with money. So in many different kinds of research, we find that women either don't have the same competence or literacy level as men. So it's one of the ways in which the Women's Foundation can begin to meet our mission of advancing women's economic opportunities is by providing more financial education for women in the state, and that's really what this conversation is all about. We believe that everybody, men and women alike, need to know what they are doing when they are managing their money, and especially when they're investing. And it's more important than ever for women now, of course, because more women than ever before will need to be able to manage their own money because there won't be anybody else there to do it. So in the cases, of course, of women who are single or just who are the head of the household as far as money goes, we feel like it's vital information for everybody. So our experts today are Kim Shappee and Debi Baydush. Debi's right here in the office with us.
Hello.
Welcome, Debi.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Yeah. And Kim is on the phone. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
Yeah. So Debi has been helping people manage money and invest money for a very long time. She's the founder of BSW Wealth Partners in Boulder and worked there and helped lots of folks for 17 years do great things with their funds. And we're lucky because now she's living right here in Montana and is interested in helping folks here think about how they want to invest their money, and especially women. So thank you, Debbie.
You're welcome, and I like to say that as a gift of my time.
That's right.
Not as a career move.
She's lending us the gift of her time, and we're very lucky. And Kim Shappee is a Montanan and has spent her whole life, basically, in different ways, managing money and helping people manage money, both as a banker and now at RBC Wealth Management. And one of the things that you should know about Kim Shappee is that she's on the board of the Women's Foundation, so we're lucky to have her financial expertise there as well. And she also has started her own financial management classes that she presents to women, and is the founder of the Athena Conference, which many of you may have been able to participate in. So welcome, Kim.
Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so as I said, we know that women are participating more and more in the labor force. We know that there is still a pay gap. However, we know that women do have more and more finances, money that they can both save, invest, use in whatever way they want. And I wanted to just start out by inviting both of our experts here to share their thoughts about sort of basic money management. So many times in my work as I go across the state and talk to women for Powerhouse Montana and the Women's Foundation, I talk to women who really feel like they're not even sure quite where to get started in thinking about money management. And so I'd love just sort of your best wisdom as if women are first looking at their finances, what are some first steps that they can take to really kind of get a handle on it and plan for their future? Debbie, do you want to start?
I'd be happy to. I think the basic fundamentals are to understand your cash inflows and how much money you're spending. I think all of us can understand the basics of those numbers. And once you can review that, the next question is, do you have outstanding debt? If you have none, congratulations. You're in the minority in the United States of America. But then you can turn your attention to starting to accumulate long-term retirement investment accounts. But if you do have debt, the first step would be to lower and pay it off. And during this phase, there are several resources for consolidating debt and making sure you're not paying 15 to 24%. You can often get it down to 7% these days with resources I'd be happy to share with follow-up emails. And I think after that, I would add 3 things that I think are really important and really all you need to know, because you do not have to buy into any culturalization or ideas that women are any less competent than men in the investing field. In fact, studies that are going to be cited in some of the resources that Jen will follow up with show that women historically are actually better investors than men. So knowing that, the 3 most important things I would recommend is to have a plan, which you can create using your own personal research, buying a basic book like Investing for Dummies, or finding a trusted, unbiased advisor. Number 2, stick to the plan. Don't change due to latest investing fads or what a friend told you they've made a killing in at a cocktail party. Just stick to the plan because, again, studies show that long-term philosophies will beat the market. Managers do not. And the third thing would be just the consistency of executing on that plan. You need to stick to it every year. It's a linchpin to success. And it's not as critical the amount of money. You could be investing $25 a month or a quarter. But starting early in your life, and you can't start any earlier than tomorrow, I know that. But studies used to show that just making a one-time IRA contribution in January of each year versus December, by the time you retire, you could have up to an extra $250,000, the miracle of compound interest. So those would be all my basics. Kim?
I love the miracle of compound interest.
That was Einstein talked about that.
Kim, what do you think?
I love everything Debbie said, and then something that I've been really interested in studying over the last 5 years is behavioral psychology, but setting up systems that we know will work with us. So in terms of Jen's original question and the basics of finance and how we can be successful there, I think part of it is looking at where am I today? Like maybe setting aside 25 minutes to an hour in your calendar, and I love the idea of calendar architecture and that you have to design your calendar the way you want to live your life and not let someone else manage it for you. So setting aside time like you would to plan a vacation to look at your finances and saying, where am I today? Let's take a snapshot of where I am today. And then Debbie's first point, looking at how much money you have coming in per month versus how much money you have going out per month. So doing those sorts of things and saying, what hasn't been working for me? And I think taking not only an audit of your actual finances and saying, okay, I've got this much in this bank account, this much in this retirement account, I owe these people or these companies X, is saying how much time each month do I spend on my finances? Because what I find with most people is they say that financial success and security is one of their top priorities, yet they very rarely dedicate any time to it. They dedicate time to running their business and to being with their family and to getting the number of things done that they need to get done, but it's not to managing their finances. So when in the next month can you set aside time to actually learn more about your finances and set aside time to think about the life you want? And I'm not sure if this is, Jen, am I doing okay here?
You are doing fabulous. I love that
Great
point.
Okay,
Yeah.
so I just want to make sure I'm still on the right question. So I think it's like setting up time to do an audit for yourself and then thinking of where you are today and where you want to be. And then I also think what I've seen in terms of people actually being successful is you have to form a support group. And whether I'm a huge advocate of women talking to each other about money, because when you talk to someone else about money, you learn about their systems and you learn what works, and you also have like a sounding board for, do you think this is a good decision for me? It doesn't have to be even other women. It can be other men. It can be partners. But figuring out who are like 2 or 3 people in my life, and like Debbie said, that could potentially be a trusted, unbiased, non-salesy advisor, but someone that you get together with that is a safe space to say, this is where I'm at today, this is where I want to get to, and like Debbie said, putting together your own plan for executing on it, but then having support when you fall down or when there's a challenge or when ends aren't meeting and you need to troubleshoot. Those are my initial thoughts, Jen and Debbie.
No, I love that. One of the things that I wanted to say about that is that, I think we have our little top tips here for success for finances, which are just super basic things. But I think one of the primary things that can influence our behavior and the outcomes around money has to do with who else we are budgeting with. And I know, Kim, that you work with a lot of folks on sort of how to manage money also with a partner. Do you have any tips for people about that, about communication or advice for people if they have a partner that they are working with to manage money?
Debbie, do you want to take the lead there?
It sounds like with your behavioral work, you might have more input into that one, although my initial thoughts are to definitely be responsible for yourself and not cede power to anyone else. But again, I think you're going to be more literate on that, so I will cede the floor to you.
I love your point, Debbie, and I do think like no one cares about your money the way you do, and it's so important that we all own that story. And I always say to people that money is a story you've been telling yourself your entire life. And I really think it's interesting to go back and see what family stories you have around money. And then if you have a partner or a spouse that you're managing finances with, to learn what their story is. Because when I work with couples, I'm amazed at how often they're very different. And figuring out if those stories are serving you. The other thing, if you share finances with someone, is instead of ostriching it, which is burying your head in the sand and hoping everything works out, what's worked for me and what I've studied and seen work for others is setting a time like you would if you were running a Fortune 500 company to have a budget and a finance meeting. And that is simply I would suggest having an agenda, and I do this with my husband, and it says, this is how much money we spent in the month of August. This is what our account balances look like, and this is what we want to do in the coming quarter or future coming forward. So if we overspent in this category, I want to decrease that for this reason. Or if we had a goal to set up a 529 account for our new baby, has that been done, and who did it, and where is it, and how is it doing? Following up on those action items, but to actually treat it like you would something professionally that you handled, which is often with an agenda, and then being prepared for that meeting ahead of time. And then also with spousal, I suggest not doing a meeting at 9 p.m. on a Sunday night. For my husband and I, we set a meeting once a month, and we have to do it like at a restaurant or a coffee shop that has internet. and we have to do it during the day when we don't have our kids around us and when we're not overwhelmed with the tasks of the day that we've been doing all day. So those are like just some top-of-the-mind tips. Jen, is that sort of what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
And I wanted to build on one of the points that you made, Kim, and that is in my 30 years of working with families, I was surprised to learn, or maybe not so surprised, that money is one of the most personal issues that any group of people and even individuals may deal with. It brings up all kinds of emotions. So one of the things I have read recently in relationship type research is it can be interesting for a couple who can have the conversation to discuss how money was handled and viewed in their own family, because that's where we get a lot of our own feelings around it. And that is a good place for a couple to start that kind of conversation, because to be vulnerable, to kind of go back to the emotional triggers that may have been set when you're young, could help form a conversation now for what goes on within a couple around money and lead to greater understanding of how to be compassionate for each person's issues and constructive conversations on how to get past that.
Yeah, I feel like this conversation around sort of the relationship we have with money is at the core of a lot of how we think about it and talk about it and act around it. So thank you, Debbie. Thanks, Kim. So one of the big things I feel like for women in particular, for everyone, is that especially in the United States, we don't save enough. We know that women still are likely to live longer than men. We know that they are still likely to make less money over the course of their lifetime. We know that for women, saving money is very important. They need to have funds even once they're in retirement. And so I'd love to hear from each of you if you just have basic recommendations that you share with women when you talk with them about retirement and saving. What are your thoughts? Debbie?
Well, honestly, I don't generally discriminate between what I tell men and women. The thing I would emphasize to women, I think I've already touched on, and that is don't believe any stories that anyone or you tell yourself about what you can do, what you can learn, and your competency around investing and money. But again, I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. It really has to do with starting as early as you can and being as consistent as you can. I can't do anything to advise you how to solve the gender gap, but I can help you make, we can all help you make the most of what you've got, and that's what it's about. I mean, people always think they need more money to get where they want to go, but there's also the option of spending less money. So there are a lot of different variables that individuals can work with depending upon their salary or their spending habits or, as Kim has said, choices that you make from month to month. There's so many variables that you absolutely have control over that you can at least maximize your potential for investment accounts, retirement capability within the framework of the hand we're all dealt in the wage arena.
Yeah. What are your thoughts, Kim?
I mean, I love Peter Drucker, and he's the father of management. At least that's what people at Harvard Business School call him. And he's got this whole section on Know Thy Time. And he thinks it's really important for individuals to do a time audit on how they spend their time, because people often, in my experience, overestimate what they can do in a day, and they underestimate what they can do in a decade. And I find that pretty true for myself on a daily basis and for my team. And I think it's very similar with money. And so if you don't know how you're currently spending your money, that is where I would start in terms of like the challenge of saving for retirement, not saving enough, and saving for the future. I just heard a funny pundit on a financial podcast that I listened to commenting on how the generation, I think it's Generation Z, spends their retirement on avocado toast and fancy lattes and kombucha. And I thought that was just so funny, because it is just the little things. I go back and forth on what's really going to move the needle for people. And I think it's negotiating for a higher wage at work is what's going to make a huge difference for you over your lifetime, versus cutting out an avocado toast every day, but you need to know how much you're spending there and if there's an opportunity for you to make a trade-off that's worth it. And that's something I'm a huge advocate of. Everyone has to make trade-offs for the most part. There's like a very small percentage in the world that don't have to make trade-offs. But if you want to reach your goals, you have to make trade-offs and you have to make them worth it. And so knowing what you truly value, and are your financial values in line with your life values, and are you spending the way you say in terms of what's important and your priorities? You can't really know those things until you've done a spending check. So knowing a spot check of your budget, what did I spend on last month? And oh my gosh, I say saving for my future is important, but I'm spending X amount of dollars per month on this item that isn't as valuable to me as my future. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And I don't know if either of you is comfortable doing this, but I'm curious whether there are general recommendations of sort of like what percentage of your income you should be putting towards your retirement savings. Does anybody want to volunteer something like that? Or do you feel like it's too individual to generalize?
I'm going to let Debbie start.
I see how it is. Yeah, I don't know that I would actually use a percentage, because I would always say as much as you can afford, because, you know, the way we talk about it is pay yourself first. You're paying for the future that you want to have before you pay off anything else. So that's way too amorphous for most people, but if you sit down, and Kim is just excelling on the practical advice, and you figure out where your values are you going to make a choice? You want to stop working as soon as it's financially possible? Do you want to be able to enjoy more things now, and you're willing to work more years? I mean, once you make all these decisions and you look at your budget, I would recommend as much as possible, because I can tell you I worked my ass off for years, but now I'm enjoying the fact that I had a goal and I met that goal, and it was worth all of the heartache and stress and everything else to get here. But that's just me. So I'm getting more kind of the philosophical point of view, and Kim has been incredible at giving you the more practical, down-to-earth, usable information. So that's my philosophical outlook, as much as you can, but that's, of course, colored by my own perspective that I didn't want to have to work a day longer than I needed to. So, Kim, I will leave it to you to be more
Debbie,
practical.
You're so funny. I love what you said, Debbie, and I totally agree with you and applaud you. And I think that one of my financial heroes is this man named Mr. Money Mustache. And he has a blog, and he's very interesting to follow. But I say he's one of my financial heroes because he basically talks about that there's this myth in America that you have to slog away until a government-defined Social Security full retirement benefit age, and then you can finally retire. And he talks a lot more about it's all about what you spend. And so if you can figure out what you spend and figure out ways to lower that, then you can retire earlier. And that the dream with retirement is freedom. It doesn't mean you don't necessarily work, but it means you have the freedom to decide if you show up at an office or a company and punch the clock every day, basically. But anyway, so in terms of a number, I've heard a rule that sometimes I use as a spot check, and that's 12 times your annual salary is what you should have saved up by the time you're ready to retire. But it truly depends on your savings. It truly depends on your spending rate, you know, how much you burn per month or per year, and that can greatly increase your likelihood of retiring earlier or later. So that's why I think I totally support Debbie's decision of you have to figure out, you know, what you need, and then as much as you can would be wonderful while figuring out a balance of, I think the reality is so many people that I see are like, oh my gosh, I can't save anything right now. I'm doing this and I'm doing that and I feel strapped. You know, how do you, I love the saying, inch by inch, it's a cinch, but, you know, slowly increase how much you're able to pay yourself first. Like Debbie said, you know, set that aside so that you don't notice that, oh my gosh, I didn't realize I've been putting away $200 a month towards retirement, now $250, now $300, now I'm maxing out my IRA contributions.
Yeah, I think one of the best, I don't even know who told me this, probably you, Kim. One of the best things somebody told me was, you know, every time you get a raise, instead of increasing, you know, sort of what you spend and your standard of living, put that into your savings and just live the same way you had been living. So I think that's helpful for people like me who have sort of a moderate income but want to be able to retire at some point. Do you have anything to add to that, Debbie?
I don't think so.
Okay. Okay.
I want to add one thing, Jen. Is that okay?
Yes, please.
I think that it's one problem with giving someone a number or a rule is it's often depressing. And then people feel like, oh my gosh, I'm so far behind where I'm supposed to be. And I think Debbie kind of alluded to this, that most people in America are probably behind where they're supposed to be. And all you can do is start one day. And you just have to start where you are and start putting it aside, and, you know, it'll grow, compounding interest.
Yes. Yeah, no, I think that's definitely true. It's just a matter of feeling like you're, I think, going upward. You're doing better each year if possible.
Totally.
And I think it makes us all feel better if we feel like we're in the driver's seat. Not, I don't know what's going on, I don't know how I'm going to get there, or I don't know how this person is making decisions for me. But even if we're not where we want to be, understanding where we are, to me, builds such confidence, and then knowing what the next steps are. Even if I can't take that next step this year, I'm going to make it a goal to make the next step next year. And, of course, I'm speaking personally, but I think it makes us all feel good to know that we're in charge of our own destiny as much as we can be.
Absolutely. I think another thing that either you, Kim, or someone else told me once that I always share with women is, at the very least, don't leave money on the table. So if your workplace offers any kind of matching, then do whatever possible to at least take advantage of that, and then increase each year.
Yeah, that's free money.
Yeah. Okay. So in addition to talking some about retirement, I wanted to talk as well a little bit about investing. And I talk to so many women across the state who I feel like this is really sort of the big mystery, figuring out how and where they would ever want to invest their money so that they would have a return that they could use for the future. And so I'd love to glean a little bit of both of your wisdom around that. I feel like this is one area where, this should not say Queen Latifah, ignore that. That's the next slide, that got in there somehow. But this is one area where I do feel like there's a lot of evidence that shows that women do even better than men. But unfortunately, many women just don't have much confidence yet around investing and what that looks like. So I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on how women can sort of jump into investing, how they can learn more and get to a place where they can be comfortable investing their money. Kim? Debbie's pointing at you.
No, I'm happy to go first. So I think that everyone learns differently. So I would start with, what do I know today and how comfortable do I feel here? And if I don't feel comfortable, how do I learn? So there is a fabulous website that I love. It's UDEMY, and I have a hard time pronouncing it. But it's where you can take lots of courses on how to give a better PowerPoint presentation, and I imagine there are courses on investing there. But there are plenty of resources across the globe and with the Internet where you could learn more about what you want to do. I'm a huge fan of books, and I think there are some really good books out there, like, for example, Peter Lynch's classic, One Up on Wall Street, Benjamin Graham, The Intelligent Investor. There are some classic books around investing that I think if any of you were to pick them up and say, I'm going to delve into this, you would definitely learn and feel better about starting off. There's also the idea of osmosis in learning. And osmosis is the idea that if you're just exposed to something enough, you will start to pick up little bits of knowledge. And so I think subscribing to a magazine like Money Magazine or Kiplinger's and reading it on a monthly basis would give you so much confidence and inspiration and excitement around it that then you could feel better about laying your plan together and putting it together and saying, where am I going to go with investing? And then I think you have to decide, am I going to go it alone? Do I have a partner that I'm working with, and do we want to come up with a plan together and how I'm going to execute on that? Or do I want to hire someone to help me navigate these waters, and do I know enough so that I can ask them really good questions and make sure that they're truly working on my behalf and for me and not doing something that I'm not going to like later? those are some places that I would start. Some resources that I'm just going to throw out there that have great free individual investor materials would be Vanguard's website and Charles Schwab's website and T. Rowe Price's website. And all of those places you can spend some time with a beverage of choice one evening driving around on their website and learning about what is a Roth IRA, what is a traditional IRA, what do I need to open an account, what is a mutual fund, what is an exchange-traded fund, how do stocks really work. The one other thing I'm going to say is there's not enough great financial education, but when I was teaching classes more in my past, I utilized the Women's Institute for Secure Retirement out of Washington, D.C. as a partner, Wiser, and they have a wonderful, wonderful website that has all of these resources for free, and I hope to be able to teach classes in the future because if you can show up somewhere with other people in person, that's one of the ways that I learn best. But seeing if there are any opportunities like that in your community could be helpful. Jen and Debbie, what did I forget? Did I answer the question?
You definitely answered the question, and I'm going to let Debbie dive in here because I know this is really her fun area of expertise.
I take a little bit different approach. I find that people who are overwhelmed and don't know where to begin need a simple kind of 1-2 plan, and I agree there are some incredible blogs, there are podcasts, there are websites, and I completely agree with the Schwab and Vanguard that you mentioned. But I think as a first step, I think that might be later on with confidence. For me, there are some women out there who've got it all going on and they want to dive right in. Those are all excellent, but for people who feel a little bit more intimidated, it may sound trite, but even just going to a bookstore and starting to flip through Investing for Dummies, I bought that for my teenage children, gives you the basics of defining different things, and you get chapters further back, investment philosophies, and because studies show that over the long term, very few managers can beat the indexes. So you just need to understand kind of the basics for getting started, and you can move up the financial intelligence ladder as you feel inclined or not. And there are, they're called robo-advisors, where it's very minimum fees, and they will allocate for you, particularly when you're starting off with a very small amount. Talking about the unbiased advisor who just keep you in the very simple, most successful philosophies. I think those two things would be a great place to start. And of course, that is also in addition to what Jen said, that retirement plans where they match your money at work are awesome because you're already doubling your money for nothing if they're matching funds. But just for education, start off with the basics and let your interest take you where it will.
Yeah, I like that. I remember, Kim, in your class that you taught, that I took, you talked too about maybe finding, if you wanted to invest in a stock or something, looking for what things you really care about and what things ignite your passion. Do you want to talk about that at all?
Oh, sure. I mean, how I sort of got started in this is I was excited about Lululemon, and I had gone to the store in Canada, and I loved it. And I grew up in a small business owning family, and so I thought to myself, I wonder who owns this. I wonder if I could own some of this. I love this product. And I was able to buy Lululemon stock on my own, and I just figured out how to do it back in the day before they had really expanded into the United States. And then I got to learn by following the Lululemon story and being like, wow, this was a good choice for me. They seem to be doing well. And that piqued my interest. So I think if there's something that you're excited about, or I can't tell you the number of people, and my husband is in this category, where he's like, I care about the environment and driverless technology and batteries versus, fossil fuels. I want to learn more about Tesla. So picking a company or something that resonates with you and your soul. There's also some new exciting investments that are all around women. But those are just some examples of a way you might find something and then do the osmosis learning experience.
Yeah. I read in one of the articles in preparation for this webinar about the fact that women invest overall differently than men, in that a lot of times they are more often investing in something that they care about rather than just, sort of looking at the finances. They're also looking at sort of the intent of the investment, like impact investing, which I thought was really interesting. What do you, either of you, are you willing to talk a little bit more about, sort of the idea of women's investing and why it might be, the research says that sometimes women's investing might beat men overall. And I've heard some different ideas about why that might be, but I wondered if either of you had ideas about that as well.
I think the studies show that it's because women tend to buy and hold longer, and when you make sound investment choices, and that those investments continue to grow their earnings because the stock price is generally a reflection of the growth potential of that company, that your investment's going to grow over time instead of jumping around. Something's doing, most investors sell at the low because they're afraid, and they buy at the high because once everybody is talking about it and everybody knows it's doing well, it's usually peaking, and that's when people buy it. But because women invest with a different kind of intention and are more patient, it's proven to be more successful. That being said, I must go on the record as saying that starting off your investing career with a single stock is fairly risky. If you have really good intuition and you're right, the story that Kim told is a lot along the lines of the Peter Lynch philosophy and bears beautiful fruit most of the time, but if it goes south, you've got all your eggs in one basket. So there's something to be said about both sides of that.
Mm-hmm. Diversifying.
Yes.
Yeah, your investment. Yeah, definitely. Or maybe just trying a little bit of something you care about while also having other investments.
Yeah, and one thing I did tell my teenage children, and these days it's so easy on the web, is to build a portfolio, a fake portfolio, and just start watching it. When you start watching what happens to things that you might buy if you had $100,000 to invest, and learn why they're up a certain day or down a certain day, that's self-education right there to understand that sometimes it has nothing to do with the company. There's a lot of history that goes into it, just like when we learn about people we love. There are all kinds of things that account for their moods and their actions.
Yeah, interesting. Kim, go ahead. You were going to say something.
Oh, I think like so much of this is similar to Peter Drucker's Know Thy Time, doing an audit of yourself, is knowing like how much time you have to spend on this and how you want to spend time on it and what you want to get out of it. In terms of women in investing and what Debbie mentioned, I completely agree. That's everything that I've read supports the idea around, women aren't as impulsive in their buys and sells, and that means they hold on longer. Women are also usually slightly more conservative financial managers, so they don't necessarily take as much risk because they have a goal and they're focused on that goal versus outperforming a friend or an index that isn't real and doesn't meet their life. So I think it's so important, and women do a really good job of seeing, well, just because the stock market is doing one thing doesn't mean that has that much to do with my everyday life, because my everyday life is focused on these 4 goals, and I've devised a plan around those goals, and that is often what makes women, I think, excellent financial managers. And I see it in meetings with clients and couples where one partner, who more often than not is male, wants to do something impulsive and exciting, and the woman helps that person walk through the steps and the reality and the risks that they've been taking and go back to the big picture.
Yes, absolutely. And what you said reminded me of this quote that I started to accidentally put on the last slide, but actually it was supposed to be on this slide. Controlling your own destiny is fun. That's what Queen Latifah says, and I agree. So I also feel like it's great for our listeners and the women in the Powerhouse to hear stories of actual cases. And I wondered if either of you has any stories you could share, obviously without personal information attached, but maybe women you've worked with and some of the successes that you've been able to help them achieve. Do either of you have any things you want to share along those lines?
Take a minute to come through them.
I missed what Debbie just said.
I said take me a minute to come through my memory.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead if you can think of one.
Well, this is just around goals, sort of, and I shared the story with Jen as we're planning a women's leadership event, and it was a woman came up to me in the park a couple weeks ago, and I was in the park, and I had my baby on my chest and my 2 boys on their bikes biking around, and it was after work hours, And she came up to me and said, I attended your Athena conference a few years ago. And I said, oh, that's awesome. What did you think? And she said, well, your session on goal setting and finances helped me set a goal to make my company $1 million company. And I said, that's awesome. And she said, I was just looking at my financials and my goals from that Athena, and I just hit that goal. And I was like, that's so wonderful. I'm so glad to hear that. Tell me more. How'd you do it? And she said, well, I had to separate my finances from my husband because I realized that I probably wasn't going to reach that goal because he wouldn't support me in buying, a new arm of the business that I wanted to buy in order to expand. And now I feel a lot better about our money because I'm in control of our money, and I set my goal, and I was able to follow up on it. Anyway, that's just a little anecdotal story that I thought was awesome around the power of, SMART goals and achievable and measurable and writing them down and having space in your life to think about that, and then realizing that I can still have a healthy relationship with my partner, but in order to do this, I'm going to need to make some changes to how we've currently been managing our finances. So that's one story that comes to mind. Debbie, did that give you time for any fun stories?
Yeah, that's great. I love that just because it's a story of somebody being really thoughtful and intentional and planned and being willing to be brave in managing their money. Thanks, Kim.
I don't know if I can give such a wonderful detailed story because I was the person in charge of selecting investments and managing all the clients' money, not the person who dealt with their individual stories. So what I know of might be, for instance, someone who had been under kind of her parents' control because it was family money, and she really wanted to invest in ways that would help other women, and she used our resources to educate herself about how she could do that and how to understand what her rights were within the family, and she actually set up a foundation that supported women in Africa making beads. And so could travel over there and do that. So we just helped educate her and understand what her options were. And it's been very successful. And the women from Africa are now running the foundation themselves. It was very successful. But generally, I don't have those kinds of stories.
Well, I love that story, too, because it is a story of a woman, sort of creating her own way to give back and do the work she wants to do with her own money, which is great. Okay, so now we've come to the point in our discussion where I wanted to let both of you share a little bit. You've both said a few different resources that you would recommend. If you have other books, websites, other podcasts, things you want to throw out there, we will do our very best to follow up with the group and email them those. So, what do you think? These are just a few books that I had been recommended by other folks in the past, but if you have some, I know Debbie had recommended Investing for Dummies. I've got that one.
Well, it really depends upon the audience.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm obviously sophisticated financially and understand the good lessons and the omissions in each of these books. So again, if people are generally starting at the beginning of learning, which I think this webinar was entitled 101, yes. I would still start with foundations of understanding financial markets, what are proven long-term strategies, ways to start off with diversified portfolios according to your age and risk tolerance. I really think those are the place to start. Rich Dad, Poor Dad on real estate investing and things. That's a bigger amount of discretionary income, which again, some people who are listening may be at that point. So it just really depends on where you are.
Yeah. What do you think, Kim? Do you have some books that you like to recommend?
So I think I mentioned the Peter Lynch book, One Up on Wall Street, and that's a fun story about, and there are some great stories about how he got some of his best financial tips from his wife and his daughter because they were the ones actually out buying things versus he was in this Wall Street high-rise and was out of touch with how people were actually spending their money. So he's a money manager from the 80s and 90s, and that's an interesting book, and it's a little old. A Random Walk Down Wall Street, that's just a classic. The Intelligent Investor is a classic. There's a really good documentary on Warren Buffett, and if you were to Google it, I wish I knew the name right now, but a documentary on Warren Buffett I think is just a really interesting story about someone who's done very well financially and that's always fun, and there's learning anecdotes throughout that. Mr. Money Mustache's blog is like a go-to for me, just on someone with some really great resources. He's featured a lot on, NPR, CNN Money, Forbes, CBC News, Washington Post, HuffPost, The Economist. So he's pretty legit, and it's a blog, and you can just read his classic blog posts, and they cover things like, are you cleaning out your own wallet, and respecting money, and the cost of commuting. So those are some fun stops that you could potentially make. I had never heard, Debbie, your recommendation makes me so happy that Investing for Dummies was actually a good book. I fully intend to order it and pick it up. And then I referenced earlier, could you share a subscription to Money Magazine or to Kiplinger's instead of reading Women's Health or a cooking journal each month? Could you share that subscription with a couple girlfriends or a couple friends in your neighborhood and pay for it and get it and then start to read it? Because I think over time you would pick up great bits and pieces. It tackles a lot of different subjects related to budgeting and spending and retirement planning and the true cost of home ownership. And I subscribe to both, and I read them, and I like them a lot, and they're valuable, I think. So those are just some options.
Awesome. I'm excited to look up Mr. Money Mustache just because it's.
Oh my gosh, I can't even wait to hear what you think.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
And there are a couple, there's one from the person who started the Vanguard Group, and the Vanguard Group has always been an advocate for the small investor, whereas most brokerage firms are really in it for themselves. I was on Wall Street in the 80s, so I can tell you that the Wolf of Wall Street is pretty much true. So the gentleman who started Vanguard, John Bogle, has the little book of Common Sense Investing. And there's also a book called The Essays of Warren Buffett, where he kind of discusses, in case your style is better reading instead of watching the documentary, you can get a lot of his wisdom and thinking from that.
Great. In addition, I put a few websites up that I personally know a little bit about. So mint.com is a place where you can go and kind of automate your savings if you want. It's a website that will help you with your budgeting. It's kind of a budgeting tool. In addition, there is a company now called Ellevest.com, and I am not vouching for them as the end-all be-all, but I do know that they specialize in women and helping women save, and so I think it's an interesting place to go and learn, even if you don't decide to use their services, because they have a lot of information and data on women and budgeting and savings there.
And that's a robo-advisor like the two I mentioned to you, Betterment.com and Wealthfront.
Right.
That was one that was started after those, and as you say, with a focus on women investors.
Right. So we can follow up with more of those links as well. And then I put one up here which I think is super fun for estate planning. So it's gyst.com, which stands for getyourshittogether.com. And it was created by a woman after her husband died suddenly, and she realized that she had no idea sort of what their accounts were or where they were or really anything about their finances. And so she created this website as a resource for women, and it has kind of a step-by-step checklist of things to go through in thinking about planning your own money and savings. So there's those. Okay, so I like to always leave some time for questions. So all of you out there on the phone, I'm going to go ahead and open up the line. And what that means is that if you have background noise, please mute your own phone. And also, this is your opportunity to chat directly with Kim and Debbie and ask them some questions. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute the lines.
The conference has been unmuted. The conference has been unmuted.
Okay, so I hear someone, but I don't think they have a question. I think it's background noise. Is somebody trying to ask a question?
Yeah, that's.
I might have to mute the lines again. I see that Kim Collier has her hand raised. Kim, do you have a question?
All right, well, let me call you when my webinar's over.
Okay. Oh, there we go. Perfect. Okay, So here is the question. Kim has typed it in for you all. And she's saying, if you're already in bed with Merrill Lynch, can you transfer to Vanguard instead?
Yes, I started off working at Merrill Lynch. I highly recommend that. Yes, all you have to do is go to, if you decide you want to go to Vanguard, they will give you the paperwork you can fill out. You don't even have to talk to your Merrill Lynch broker again, or you can let your Merrill Lynch broker know that you're making the change, whatever you feel most comfortable with. And Vanguard will let you know what assets that you may have that can come over as is, which cannot, where it may be cheaper to get rid of it if you decide to get rid of it at Vanguard or Merrill Lynch. But just talk to the person at Vanguard. They are definitely on your side.
Wonderful. Anything you want to add to that, Kim?
Nope, I totally agree with Debbie, and I love the question.
Awesome. Kim says, thank you. Okay, any other questions out there for our experts? Judy, do you have a question?
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. This has been wonderful. And I sent to all of my young professional daughters and told them to listen in today. So I hope they are. I was curious that no one mentioned Susie Orman. Is she someone that they should follow or someone they should not follow?
Well, I have only watched her for a whole total of maybe 20 minutes, and it was a little bit too much showmanship for me, but it might work for someone else, so I cannot comment on that. I'm an advocate of following your own inner voice after educating yourself, so whether she works for someone or not, I can't comment, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Kim, what do you think?
So, confession, I love Susie Orman's book, Young, Fabulous, and Broke. I gift it to people, to young people who are having a hard time. But I often don't recommend it because she can be so I totally agree with Debbie, showman-y kind of and oversimplifying sometimes. I think there's so much nuance for people. But I definitely think there are parts of her story that are super compelling and they're always good tidbits. So that is a book of hers that I personally like a lot.
Thank you.
Wait, I'm sorry, which book did you say, Kim?
Young, Fabulous, and Broke.
Okay, gotcha. All right, any other questions out there?
Well, I just want to say to Judy that if your daughters didn't get to listen, I think this is recorded and they can listen to it later.
Yep, yeah, we'll send you a link and you can forward it along to them as well. Okay, other questions for our experts?
Hi, this is Rachel. I'm calling in on computer audio, so hopefully you can hear me. I work with lots of young people who are right out of school, and I'm just wondering what advice you would have for people who are have lots of debt. And I think a factor of our economy right now is a lot of people are working various side hustles or contract employment or employment that doesn't offer retirement or even healthcare benefits and stuff like that sometimes. And I just find that a lot of times financial advice really isn't for them. And so I'm wondering what the most, maybe some of the key tips you would offer.
Well, I have a child who falls into some of that category, not all of it, as the contract employee, but I understand the debt side, and I think that would be a place where they can perhaps be really smart. I mean, they have to pay off that debt, and the question is whether they're paying the lowest rate they can find for that debt, and to manage that properly would be one of the first things, because that's a drain on their finances until they get to the point when that is handled as effectively as possible. Then, if they have other income, then they can look at what other things are important to them. Obviously, healthcare would be number one, even before the debt probably. But that's a very challenging situation, and it's going to be very individual depending upon the size of the debt and how much are they making. I'm sorry, I can't give you a silver bullet for that one because that is a pervasive issue today in the United States.
Yeah, definitely. Kim, do you have some advice?
I do, I think. And I'm not sure if it's good advice, but one thing that I see happen a lot with people that are side hustling or contracting is they don't know actually how much money they're making. And they think they're making much more money than they actually are. And so I think like starting early with systems and realizing that systems are so great to fall back on, and being able to say, I know I have a profit and loss for myself, and I know how much I'm actually making per month. A lot of those people get paid like gig economy style by the job, and so they don't really know that they can live off of $2,000 a month or $3,000 or $4,000 or $500. So I think figuring out a system to track and say, I know what I'm actually making, like what's coming in and what's going out in reality when I take taxes into account, is a really good step around respecting money and then being able to come up with a strategy to pay down debt and potentially save.
Cool.
Yeah.
Thank you both.
Yeah, it's interesting. So I was having this conversation the other day with a friend, and maybe you two can shed some light on it. And we were talking about whether, you always hear pay down debt, but if your debt is really low interest, like student loans, is it still smart to, instead of paying that down, to save that money? I mean, I know it all depends on percentages and everything else, but this is kind of the argument we were having. Do you both want to speak to that a little bit? Kim,
Sure.
What do you think?
First of all, since this is a women webinar, I'm sorry I'm pumping if you can hear it.
We can't even hear it, but thank you for sharing.
Okay.
Now we know.
Sorry, I all of a sudden felt like everyone can hear it. Moving on to your question, I think having a list, like on a balance sheet for yourself that says this is every debt I have and this is the interest rate, is part of owning your financial power and facing your truth and knowing where you're at, and then setting a number of good debt interest rate and bad debt interest rate. In my mind, off the top of my head, that would probably be 4%. Anything below 4%, I would be thinking, okay, that's probably a decent rate. Anything above 4%, I don't know if I could beat that in the stock market without taking too much risk, and I would rather just pay that down. And I'm sure Debbie's going to have some really great insight, and I probably picked the wrong number. But thinking about, if I could pay off debt and it's above 4%, then I probably should. But if it's under 4%, like a student loan that's helping you build your credit and you've been historically making payments on, or a really low interest rate car loan, those are two things that if you had to decide between saving for your future self and paying that down quickly, I would probably save for my future self instead of pay down a 2.5% student loan. But a lot of student loans now, I think, are like in the 6 to 10% range, and that's harder. Debbie?
Yeah.
Yeah, well, a number of things. It needs to be the effective interest loan rate, because some of that may or may not be tax deductible depending upon how much money you make. So you kind of have to figure out what it's really costing you. Just to use round numbers, you might have a loan that's 5%, but if you can write off part of it, you're at Kim's magic 4% number. It also matters the time period that you have the loan. If it's a short-term loan, I agree completely with Kim. In long term, when you're looking at a diversified investment portfolio, long term is 10 years, I think, for me. For some people, it's 1 year. Then you can start to have some statistical reliability on what kind of returns you can expect from the investing alternatives. Now, historically, stocks have been close, like 8.9%, but you may have some bonds in there. So, again, it's going to be very individual according to the interest rate on your loan, as Kim said, the length of time, the actual cost of the loan, which may or may not be different from the stated rate, as well as your investing time horizon. Like I said, if it was like a house loan at 4% and it's a 20-year loan and you could make on your portfolio 8%, absolutely you're going to just keep that mortgage. So it's just, one thing that Kim keeps saying that's absolutely true, if you sit down and write it down, the numbers do not lie. The information is there. Just have to schedule the time to take care of your financial health that way, and you will have the answers you need.
Wonderful. So it sounds a little bit complicated, and so that is a good reason to spend some time on it, educate ourselves, and if need be, contact either Debbie or Kim, who have generously offered their contact information here. If you have a question that you wanted to run by them after the webinar today, they're willing to go ahead and let you know their thoughts on that. And of course, you can also follow up with either myself or Maggie, who runs our Powerhouse project, and we can oftentimes connect you with ideas, resources, etc. And as I said before, we are planning on following up with a link to the recording of this conversation, as well as many of these awesome resources as we can locate for you, so that you can go ahead and follow up after today and schedule some time for yourself to think a little bit about your financial future. So we are out of time, but I just wanted to say thank you so much to both Debbie and Kim for joining us today, and for those of you on the phone for making time for our webinar today as well. I think you can tell by the fact that Kim was pumping while talking to us that she has a busy schedule. And I know that Debbie is often out of town and not always available, so thank you both so much for your time.
You're welcome, although I'm always available by email, wherever I am.
Wonderful. Yep. Thanks for being willing to follow up with women if they have questions. Thank you, Kim.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate everybody. Have a great day.
Thanks, everybody.
You too.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.